Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? I see a few affirmative nods. I take it as a yes. My name is Tomáš Valášek. I am the permanent representative of the Slovak Republic to NATO, but I suspect that I'm really here with my other capacity, which is as honorary chairman of the Central European Policy Institute, one of the partners in organizing the conference. I have the pleasure and honor, really, to this morning to kick off the most senior defense panel and defense event of this conference, a conversation about regional defense cooperation. We had a chat before before this panel in the speaker's room when getting mic'd up with these Britney Spears microphones about how old defense collaboration among the V4 countries really is, whether it's a couple of years, 2 or 3. But I think we can safely agree now that we have, as a V4 in defense terms, passed the infancy stage and are probably moving into the adulthood, I hope. And arguably propelled somewhat by the events in Ukraine and Russia as well. So what I plan to do in a second is to introduce our 4 speakers, our very senior panel, and ask them about the state of the defense collaboration among the Visegrad 4 countries. What have we accomplished already? What is in store? What are some of the initiatives, the new openings that might be in the store, in room for us? And really, and to some extent, are the events in Ukraine to the east of us giving more or less importance to collaborating amongst each other on the development of new capabilities? Before I turn the floor over to the speakers and ask them all to give a short introductory statement, let me do the most important bits, which is to introduce them, of course, beginning with the Minister of Defense of Poland, Mr. Tomáš Siemoniak. It's a real pleasure. To his right, Minister of Defense of the Czech Republic, His Excellency Martin Stropnický. To the far left, geographically, certainly, Parliamentary State Secretary of the Ministry of Defense of Hungary, Mr. Tamás Varga. And nearest to me is His Excellency Miloš Koterec, the State Secretary of the Slovak Defense Ministry. We haven't really agreed a speaking order, but I propose that we may want to proceed in the order in which I have just introduced the speakers. So could I invite Mr. Siemoniak to kick off our proceedings? Minister.
Dziękuję bardzo. Witam serdecznie Państwa. Dziękuję.
Thank you very much. I would like to welcome you very warmly. Thank you for this invitation to the conference to Bratislava. I would like to thank for the topic that has been planned by the organizers and gives a possibility to meet within the group, which very often meets and encounters on different opportunities. Over the recent years, at the ministerial level, we would have a dozen or so, at least. We are meeting, of course, in a slightly different situation than if it was a year ago. We know what's happening in the east of Europe. We know that the security issues are now the focus of the attention of the government and the public opinions. But opening this discussion, I would like to say that for many years we've been developing a very solid foundation of the cooperation between Visegrad countries, and the situation is not taking us by surprise. And just as the topic of the discussion tells us about setting the tone for regional Visegrad defense cooperation, we may say that for some time we were preparing an instrument to play some subtle instruments. Today we need the drums, but we are prepared for that. We have behind us very active presidencies which were working to make sure that defense matters are turned into specific deeds and specific projects. This is this new opening that the moderator has referred to. We hope that this cooperation, the elements of which will be the common defense planning and joint projects in terms of military equipment, political proximity, and Visegrad battle group, joint joint cooperation and exercises will strengthen the Visegrad Group. We need this strengthening not only because our four countries believe so, but also because we would like together in the EU and NATO strive to make sure that there are more matters serving the security. We are approaching the September Wales summit in the opinion of Poland. The most important thing is the strengthening of the military presence in the east and return to the real level of defense budgets. We realize how these two things are complicated, but I think that this is a precise answer to a current challenge. So once again, let me thank you for the possibility to discuss. Thank you, the Slovak hosts. Let me highlight that apart from the discussion today, we are going to sign a new agreement on defense cooperation with Slovak colleagues. Yesterday, I saw the Czech colleague in Wrocław, and I saw a week ago a Hungarian colleague in Krakow. So we are not only sitting on such prominent panels, but we are close to one another, for which I would like to very much thank.
Thank you, Minister, also for your kind words for the conference and the event. Minister Stropnicki, I'm not going to ask you about defense budgets, though I suspect the audience at some points may bring that up. But let me simply at this point ask a simple question. Where do you see the regional defense collaboration going over the next year or two, and what has been accomplished so far?
Děkuji. Já si poprvé dopřeji ve své funkci na mezinárodním fóru mluvit.
Thank you. I will dare to speak my mother tongue at the international forum. I hope you will forgive me. I think especially I can afford this, especially in your country. I thank you for this opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you also for the invitation, of course. Thank you for this event coming into existence, and it's certainly very significant, without question. First, I would like to follow up on Tomasz, on Minister of the Polish Republic, in the sense that the cooperation is really very close. It is frequently mentioned as a certain diplomatic courtesy issue. It is not the case. It is more than that. Visegrad Group can exist in a formalized way. It can exist on a good quality paper, for example, but it is very important what people meet there, specifically also in the tasks of the ministers, and it depends on certain chemistry. And I am pleased to say that in all three partners, but this is true also for you, gentlemen, state secretaries, also in the second layer or tier of high representatives, we have the opportunity to talk directly without any phrases and to address the problems or try to address the problems as they exist, because there are many problems, of course. Should we start with what is going on in the east, to the east from the Slovak or Polish borders? Should we speak about other challenges, and there is a number of them? We got into a situation when we face a certain risk, which is in a way without precedence, because this is not only a classical conflict, but at the same time it is a serious security issue or situation. It's hard to say, is it a civil war, is it not a civil war, who fights against whom, who is backing whom. So it was possible to establish a very unclear, non-transparent security situation, which bothers us all, of course, and we have to react on it in some way. Therefore, it will be very important. There will be a meeting of ministers in Brussels in June, in a few weeks' time, and the central or focal point will be the NATO summit, and it will certainly address the urgent issues related to the future of the alliance in Afghanistan, and of course it will address the budgetary issues, because that is one of the central security topics, and with a high probability they will focus also on the task of the United States within the alliance, especially within the European security space. I personally support very much this transatlantic bond, and I think that the presence of the USA is very important and principal from security viewpoint. And I was pleased when during the recent trip in the US, when there 1 week after Tomasz, so we have similar programs in a certain way, and the approach of United States is not so simple as it is frequently interpreted. Deviation away from Europe, it is not true, but certainly Europe has to take upon its own share of responsibility. I don't want to speak long, but I want to return to Visegrad for a while. It is favorable that we signed some documents which should be some framework for our deepened cooperation. We also prepare very specific common procedures. We try to find possibilities, and we are finding them already in important and demanding issues such as acquisition of military equipment. I do not want to shorten the discussion to prevent you from asking questions, so I would like to conclude here. And once again, I would like to thank you for your invitation.
Thank you very much, Minister. Our next two speakers represent the outgoing and the incoming Visegrad presidencies. And as in defense, as in other matters, the presidencies set the tone for what happens over the next several months. Could I therefore invite first State Secretary Varga and then State Secretary Koterec to reflect on the accomplishments of the Hungarian presidency in the defense field, and then State Secretary Koterec to reflect on what might be the priorities of the Slovak presidency in the defense realm. State Secretary Varga.
Köszönöm szépen, tisztelettel köszöntöm a konferencia részvevőit, és szeretném átadni Hende Csaba miniszter úr.
Thank you very much. Warm welcome to the participants of the conference, and let me just convey the message of Minister Csaba Hende. Unfortunately, due to his illness, he cannot be here with us today. And also, thank you very much for your kind invitation. Well, it is true, as the acting president of the V4 countries, we consider this conference very important. Also, this is an opportunity to report about the results of the previous year, and also we would like to explore how we could realize the potential of the V4 countries. This cooperation between the Visegrad countries looks back actually to several years, but in terms of defense, up until recently, when we just set a new pace, a new direction for cooperation, we had no significant results. But then the change of the global and regional security situation, and also the change of the economic situation and the negative impact of the economic crisis just forced our countries to set new pace of regional cooperation. We didn't have to find new forms of regional cooperation. We just had to find new ways and new directions. And of course, for Hungary, due to the fact that our values are identical and our history is similar and the cultural background is also very similar, it was important for these four countries of ours to cooperate. And this was also reinforced by our heads of governments when they committed themselves to deepen the cooperation within V4, and based on the tasking of the ministers during the course of the Hungarian presidency, we just developed the long-term vision, which is our long-term strategy, so the long-term vision, and also the framework of our joint defense planning cooperation. These areas, the areas we have advanced in and the areas we have improved, like capability development and joint procurement, and also the harmonization of the plans, defense planning. This, in terms of defense planning, is very, very important, and this is going to serve as a tool to identify the areas where even in a regional setup, we could just cooperate and we could be more effective and more efficient in terms of developing our capabilities, military capabilities, and harmonizing our procurement. In terms of the multinational force, we also made significant steps forward because by 2016 we plan to set up the V4 EU battle group, which we are working on already. And I really do believe that based on the experience and the lessons learned concerning the setting up of the EU battle group, we could just contribute to operations launched under the umbrella of either the EU or NATO. The government of Hungary just recently made the decision concerning one of the important elements, that is direct air support. Close air support, direct air support, in terms of which we do participate and do contribute to EU battle group. Our 10 years development plans also included the CAS, the close air support capability, which has been brought forward just recently, and this is our commitment, our offer to the battle group. And of course, education training is also a very important field in which cooperation is of essence, because that also is an important part of our cooperation. And of course, this is going to be could be one of the first opportunities as cooperation in 2016. We are going to have a high visibility exercise, the Trident Juncture, in 2016, and this is also going to be connected to the validation task, or the validation. This is going to be the validation exercise of the EU battle group. I do believe that this work and this achievement is something we can build on, and by the end of June, the meeting of the prime ministers, by which we are going to prepare by all probability our joint declaration, we will be able to hand over the presidency to our friends, our Slovak friends, who will then be responsible for developing the action plan. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, State Secretary. State Secretary Koterec, the Slovak Defense Ministry will be in charge as of June, as we have just heard. I know you personally to have been very intimately involved in steering the course of Visegrad's defense collaboration. Could I ask you to give us a sneak preview, so to speak, of what's in store?
Ďakujem, Tomáš. Ak dovolíš, tak...
Thank you very much, Tomáš, if you allow. Before approaching the topic, let me welcome ministers here in Slovakia. So welcome, Your Excellencies, and at this very unique opportunity when we have the possibility to discuss these issues in an in-depth manner. And I'm very grateful for that, because we have been having meetings on all possible levels for quite some time. And as Mr. Stropnicki mentioned, there is a certain chemistry of understanding, certain chemistry of cooperation between us. And I think that this is a good prerequisite for a better cooperation and more enhanced communication. This is very helpful, not only on the superior level, but also on lower levels. And equally, as Poland has started its presidency, when we came into power as our government, so it was about the same time, we didn't have any other option but to act proactively. And the following presidency, which was Hungarian presidency, only confirmed the fact that this approach, this proactive approach, was very well chosen. It was a very good decision to have frequent meetings and also to develop the topics of common defense cooperation. I have to say that a very important element in the development of greater intensity of our cooperation was the economic crisis, the backdrop of economic crisis, the lack of financial resources, the lower capacity, financial capacity that we had, and also the pressure to act jointly, pooling and sharing initiatives, and also other activities in order to use the existing resources more efficiently. This was also the activity on a regional level, which was the cooperation of the Visegrad Group. And I have to say that over the last 2 years, we have been working in a very intense manner. As Mr. Szymoniak mentioned, we have now the new opening proposal on the table. It's a list of activities which are now transformed or will be transformed into an action plan, which Mr. State Secretary Varga has mentioned. this is indeed something which will enable us to take very specific and targeted steps that will be taken during the Slovak presidency of the Visegrad Group. I'd like to say that to a certain level, to a certain degree, we are happy that as part of the Slovak presidency, we will have more opportunities to do more hardware actions. So far, much has been done on the software level, so to say. We had political agreements, we had political discussions. We came to an understanding how to move forward. This is all very well set up. And I do hope that during the Slovak presidency, we will have the opportunity to present the Visegrad Group in a very specific way, in a very practical way, so to say. As my colleagues have already said, we already have a very good level of cooperation in a field of defense planning. Just an example, over the last year, or during the last planning period of NATO, we managed to exchange the defense planners during the setup of the individual defense plans of the Visegrad countries. This is rather unique as part of the initiative. On the other hand, the alliance, NATO itself, gives a high priority to such coordination of defense planning. So we are only at the very beginning. On the other hand, this cooperation in the field of defense planning can be taken for a good basis. It's a good starting line for the further steps that will be taken, because this covers everything that already has been mentioned: training, education, maneuvers, common public procurement or joint public procurement. So all of that has been put into one umbrella activity, and I think that a lot is already ready. It's prepared, both on the ministerial level, but also I have to say that we had the pleasure of working on a very good, with a very good material at the level of prime ministers. We have prepared an excellent declaration. The Hungarian presidency prepared an excellent declaration which will be approved by the prime ministers in June. This will be an important milestone in the defense cooperation for the future. I do not want to link this to the current situation in Ukraine. On the other hand, the cooperation which we are developing now will be a natural element of improvement. It will demonstrate a better improvement or better readiness of our countries for anything that might happen in our region.
Very well, thank you very much, and also thanks to everyone for their discipline in keeping the remarks short and saying just enough to leave us all intrigued and wanting more. I would like to, at this point, to open it up to questions to the audience. I suspect people will want to know what are perhaps some of those specific hardware projects that State Secretary Koterec has alluded to, what specifically might be in the new opening that Minister Semoniak has alluded to. I suspect people want to know about the money. How is this going to be financed in the given economic situation? And to the extent that others would like to come back, perhaps the audience would like to come back to Ukraine, I am certainly curious to hear more about the impact of Ukraine. It has been said by both State Secretary Koterec and State Secretary Varga that it was the economic crisis that in many ways has launched and gave birth to the Visegrad defense collaboration. The question on my mind is whether the crisis in Ukraine is now perhaps redirecting or giving more urgency to the Visegrad's defense collaboration. But you haven't come here to listen to me. You've come here to listen to the ministers and state secretaries, and I see the first question in the audience. Can I ask the audience to speakers to stand up, introduce themselves, wait for the microphone, and I will take questions in groups of 3. That's good customary practice. So first question right here in the middle. Can I invite the gentleman to stand up and wait for the microphone?
Thank you. Tomasz Szatkowski, National Center for Strategic Studies, Warsaw. My question is, Your Excellencies, given the geopolitical situation, should the Visegrad Battle Group still be the flag project of the group? After all, the battle groups were meant for some other purposes, namely crisis management missions outside of the European Union. We have a crisis right now at our eastern borders. So shouldn't we be thinking more on some more on hard security measures rather than things like EU battle groups? Thank you.
Excellent question, tough question. Let me ask the speakers to hold off for now and ask the ladies to pass the microphone here to Marcin Zaborowski on my right. Marcin?
Thank you. Marcin Zaborowski, Polish Institute of International Affairs. Mr. Minister Siemoniak, you mentioned the need to go back to what you call the real level of defense spending. Yesterday we heard quite a lot of resistance to the notion of other Visegrad nations contributing more to defense spending, including one of the prime ministers calling an increase an immoral idea. So I wonder how it can be reconciled with the plans for further regional cooperation.
Thank you, Marcin. Never mincing your words, as ever. And I see the last question this round here in the middle. The lady in the middle, please. Third row. Yes, right here. Sorry for pointing.
Thank you very much. I'm Farid Al-Nagi from Libya. I hope I'm not going to disappoint the audience. I'm neither going to ask a question about budget or Kiev. I want to take this opportunity as a woman talking to 4 ministers of defense to bring to the attention of the audience the Security Council Resolution 1325, which emphasized the fact that the time has come that women has to be part of conflict management and conflict resolution simply because they have been among the first victims. Civilians always have been among the first victims of wars. And the pillars of this resolution is participation, protection, and prevention. So I'm very keen to know if you, in your own countries, as ministers of defense, have been implementing this resolution that has been unanimously adopted in October, 31st of October at the Security Council, and that you are really now keen to bring women and youth and civil society, the new forces, to really ensure that global security is not only lies among ministries of defense, but we also have to connect it very soon with the human security. And as a Libyan, in the Arab Spring, this is our agenda. We are no longer talking on women agenda, but we are talking definitely and educating ourselves on security issues. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that point. It is certainly the case that the defense world remains still very much a male-dominated world. So there you have it. 3 excellent questions. Should the EU battle groups still be our flagship? Are they useful for the sort of scenarios that we perhaps ought to worry about now, the sort of scenarios that are unfolding to our east? How are we going to pay for all this? Can we actually implement those things, our plans on present budgets, and the role of women in our defense work? Who would like to start? Minister Siemoniak?
Zaczynam, bo 2 pierwsze pytania
I will start because 2 first questions from my compatriots, from Poles, I received. I'm very pleased to see them. I would like to say hello to my colleagues asking good questions. With regard to the battle groups of the EU, the discussion is taking place for a long time. It started much longer between the Ukrainian and Russian crisis. Many countries believes that the current formula of the groups makes it impossible to use them in real life, even for the mission outside of Europe. So the discussion which was concluded during the December European Council, when the member states supported the idea of reforming the groups to make sure that they can be practically used. We are supporting it very much, and when talking to our colleagues within the Visegrad group, we would like to make sure that even if it goes beyond a little bit of the current EU regulation, making sure that the Visegrad group is the flagship project, which is not only a political entity, but has some real uses. So they train maybe it is not only for half a year, but for a bit longer. It organizes the cooperation with some other states, and as a target, it can be used in all the possible goals that the battle group can imagine. Today it is quite difficult, but I think that what's been happening will make the 1.5 year that the EU slated before the next summit, which is on the common security and defense policy, is the time to talk about it, because everything that we've been talking over the recent years has a new context. We either draw some conclusions or not, but when talking to my colleague from the Visegrad group, we have the strong sense of the need for practical solutions. The fact that we will sign something and come here will not strengthen the security. We need the real capabilities. When it comes to the second question, the discussion is starting. We are expecting that the September summit in Newport will be the moment when the member states will commit to various activities, and these activities, already Napoleon said, one needs to wage a war. So not being very original, money is needed. So I think that this is an issue which will be covered over the coming weeks and months. And the current positions, I hope so, will be evolving. I hear also from many countries the voices that the reflection on the current situation is quite strong, and the conclusion is obvious. With regard to women sharing this way of thinking, which you've presented, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that there is a few female defense ministers also in Europe. So it's not that only male ministers dominated these positions. We have accepted practice because we can have successive ministers, women in some countries. I can also say about Poland, we are trying to make sure that the number of women in the army is on the rise. We are developing certain structures. We have the Council for Women. Over the recent 2 years, the number of women increased by 1,000. We are trying to make sure, maybe not creating some preferences or parity programs, but by creating the equal conditions, we see that women are doing quite well. I have an example that for the third year, the 5 first positions in the Naval Academy are taken by women as the best students. So it seems that this direction is right. We are willing to take part in various projects which would strengthen the participation of women and increase the role of the women, because I realize that we are right at the beginning of the road. And with that, I would like to thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Would anyone else like to come in on these issues? Minister Stropnický, perhaps?
Thank you. Děkuju. Tady byla řeč o Napoleonovi, jestli jsem si správně přeložil sám.
There was a speak about Napoleon, and it's a treacherous issue because I understand the first, second, third question, then I get lost in the fourth, fifth, and sixth, and then I understand the seventh sentence. So I have to improve my Polish in future. I would not like it to sound too provocative. I believe that I will be understood correctly, but Napoleon allegedly said that when your adversary makes a mistake, you should not disturb him in this process. I think that is exactly what we should not do in relation to the current crisis, and I think that it is not taking place. The public can sometimes consider those steps of the union or the alliance less strict for somebody hesitant, but believe me that it is very important to maintain the common voice. the resulting unisono of opinions, and it's not easy to obtain. There are various focuses in different member states and different perception, but until now it was successful, and it is some basic block on which we can build further. It is a certain security crisis, certainly without precedent since the end of the Second World War, and let us try in our work level to understand it as a certain opportunity, and I think this is happening. It's happening while we meet very frequently, and in the last weeks we are getting to concrete results. It was a battle group was mentioned. Of course, it is an important and pilot project, and I fully share the opinion of my Polish colleague that it should not be a one-off issue, that we should prepare in time certain follow-up or the future of this these battle groups, of this battle group. I spoke about the acquisitions, but we will get to that through a separate question probably. What is our homework? We try to do something on domestic political field in the Czech Republic. We prepare a political declaration which should be a certain basis for defense of the country, certain political consensual document which will not be bound by electoral periods, but it will be perceived as consensual material in a long term. We are working on that. It is not only declaratory, of course, it is also a certain financial obligation calculated up to future roughly 5 years. It is a principal issue. You know that the member states which fulfilled the recommended 2% contribution from GDP. There are not many of them. There are 4. I would say there are 5 of them, because in the event of Poland, it is also, let us not be formalistic, it is also almost 2%, but then it starts to drop, and we 3 remaining countries are not in the best situation as we would wish. It is a principal issue. It cannot be done overnight. It depends on the effectiveness of economies. Let us hope that the economic crisis, the worst of that, is behind us, and the growth will start in a differentiated way in future. Our numbers for future seem to be relatively positive, where it will be easier for me to argue to do something about the budget. But there is another important but. I do not know whether it's a Czech specific, but it doesn't matter. In fact, my role is to speak about the country which I represent here. Ministry of Defense never belonged among some great business entities or economists. That's an euphemism. So we have to efficiently manage our budget to prove that we spend for correct things, correct values, in correct quality, that we do not spend the costs for monetary costs, and then we can achieve, and we do everything to achieve that, we can achieve certain favorable increase, because with our 1.1% of GDP, we cannot be satisfied with the situation. So here I see quite a principal issue. If I deviated from the questions, should I add something, then Mr. Ambassador advised me what I forgot about.
Pane ministře, vy odpovedali ste vynikajúco a môžeme, myslím, kľudne nechať priestor v prípadných ďalších kolách, ak vás ešte niečo napadne. For the English interpreters, I said that was an excellent answer, and if anything else springs to mind, there will be room in the next round. I would like to, there's no obligation on everyone to come back on everything, but invite...
Guests maybe first.
Certainly.
Köszönöm szépen, csak nagyon röviden, hiszen sok minden elhangzott valóban
Thank you very much. Very briefly, because a lot of things have been said already. Obviously, the EU battle group, the point of the EU battle group is not really in my view, that we are setting this up together, and then we will have set up something together. This is not a goal. This is a tool. It's not an objective. It's a tool. Because the setting up the EU battle group is already the process of cooperation, and this is the point here. And then, of course, we are going to have the validation exercise, and then we will have like half a year of cooperation until this battle group will be, before this battle group will be validated. Now, such a battle group has not yet been deployed, but this is a path we have embarked upon, we have started, and this is the strength of it is really the cooperation and the joint effort that we're making in order to set up this battle group. And yes, meanwhile, very close to our countries, there are new challenges that are emerging, but this again shows very well that we are on the right track. Now, how are we going to have the money to all of this? Because obviously the economic crisis falling out after 2008 did not really help, again, to be euphemistic and to use an understatement. We couldn't really increase the defense spending. We actually decreased the defense spendings in quite a lot of countries. The Hungarian government, though, made the decision and the commitment that until 2015, there is going to be no decrease of the defense spending. It is not going to go down. It is not a very high level where we are right now, but at least it's not decreasing. And year by year, in certain fields, it is actually being maximized, like, for example, close air support is a very good example there too. If that's needed, extraordinary budgetary steps are made as well. But according to the government decree, starting from 2016, 0.1% of the GDP is going to be the increment of the defense spending every year. And I do believe, indeed, that that your question was absolutely right. The participation of women in the defense of the countries is very important. And of course, the Minister just recently said that the position of defense ministers is not really very much envied. But I do believe that the special and sensitive thinking is very much needed, not only by us, but the whole world. I mean, the special sensitive thinking, way of thinking of women, this is very much needed because they have a different approach and a different type of thought process in terms of solving problems. And actually, we do need this in terms of defense and in terms of home defense as well. And I also do believe that in addition to that, while we have to be open, we should not think in terms of quota. We actually have to give the opportunity of women in ways of being open so that they could participate according to their skills, according to their talents, and according to their capabilities. And we should just accept that and thank them for their participation.
Thank you for those words, just as a way of illustration of the challenge ahead of the 28 ambassadors at NATO, only 2 are women, so we certainly have a mountain to climb, and it's not just a Visegrad problem. State Secretary Koterec.
Áno, ďakujem. Ak dovolíš, pane veľvyslanec, tak rád by som zdôraznil.
Thank you very much. I'd like to emphasize that there is a lot to catch up with because the number of ministers is, I think there's 5 of them in total, ministers of defense. So I think that the males are still winning by a big margin. But I'll get back to that at the end. Let me now comment on what was the initial question, namely flagship initiative and the battle group. As it has already been said by ministers speaking before me, the project is rather interesting also from the perspective that it was one of the most palpable bases for the development of our cooperation. And despite the fact that flagship is at the moment a very strong word, perhaps, because this moves us to multiple different levels. On the other hand, this battle group, which as part of the Visegrad group is now being prepared, is something which already in 2015 will be seen on the operational level. We will be able to test it on the operational level. And I'd like to emphasize that here we already look for possibilities how to deal with certification of such battle groups. And we are working with making sure that the European battle group would be certified as part of the alliance training system, Trident Juncture, next year. And I believe that this is also some sort of a novelty in the approach, because whether we are talking about an effective usage of funds that we have, more effective cooperation, or on the other hand, also creating certain dimensions between the European Union and NATO. As far as financial means are concerned, financial means allocated for defense, I believe that what has been said at the beginning, the cooperation, or that the fact that the cooperation is mainly to improve the regional cooperation, make it more effective. Such effectiveness means mainly saving financial resources or cuts in our budgets, making them more efficient, despite of the fact that Slovakia has the GDP share for defense 1.1 percentage point. The issue of usability in future for palpable defense purposes is much higher. And the examples that we have, either in Poland or, for example, those examples given by Minister Stropnicki, linked to some sort of a broad social understanding that defense of the state is only one unique aspect, that there cannot be any political influences over the defense of a country, nor any foreign political influences. In this respect, I would like to get a certain support, which would have a major impact also for strategic planning. Because we all fully understand the fact that planning defense every 4 years on the basis of the fact that who won the elections and who is currently ruling the country, this is absolutely incomprehensible. And also the current defense environment pushes us towards a more effective and more stable planning. We also need to emphasize the fact that within the initiative, within the alliance, it's not only the 2 percentage points, but also 20 percentage points. It's a share of resources that needs to be allocated as part of our defense budget for modernization. And I have to say that over the last 2 years, we've managed to double this percentage share. We have increased this share from 16 to 20 percentage points, and the pledge of the minister is to reach 20 percentage points already this year. So, again, a different perspective on the fact how big resources are we willing to invest into defense. The other issue, which can be helpful to a great extent and hasn't been used so far, are European funds. The European Union itself is ready to invest much more into projects which are of dual usage. This means projects that can be used either as a very good support for defense activities and defense policy, and at the same time they are a very good part of the crisis management on the local and national level. And here we have a major support from the European Union, and European funds are also directed in this way. So we are counting with a more effective usage also with PPP projects. That means using those funds where they are available and combining them with resources from the private sector. We are now discussing only theoretically at only a general level about the possibility of using the financial tools such as, for example, the VAT, special VAT regimes for such essential purchases like defense purchase or defense investments on a long-term basis. Industrial cooperation on the Visegrad level. This is a very good part and also a very important way of how to channel the existing resources into a more efficient investment projects. As Mr. Stropnicki has said, higher efficiency of defense spending is clearly a priority, and we have a lot to do in this respect. So there's a multitude of details, multitude of minor issues, which combined create substantial numbers. If pulled together, this brings higher defense spendings in total numbers. It's sometimes very difficult to count all these individual partial expenditures, because very often we have to divide between, or we have to look for those things which are efficient, both for defense and also for national economy at the same time. So we are now looking for more effective tools. We are trying to use what we have in the most efficient manner. The budgets are as they are. It's a result of the current economic cycle, the current economic situation. On the other hand, we shouldn't just use this as an excuse that we cannot do more because of the limited resources. We can still do more. Regarding women in defense policy or in their involvement in different security and defense scenarios, as I have already said at the beginning, the club of lady ministers in a North Atlantic Treaty Organization is growing step by step. There are more and more women, although it takes some time. We have been discussing about we have been discussing at the level of ministers that perhaps in years to come the share will be 50-50, and this will be very interesting. And I think that the ambassadors would then have to catch up with us also to have a similar share. Regarding the army itself, regarding the armed forces, I have to say that women have we have an open door policy. We have the equal footing principle, which means that if anyone fulfills with the requirements or anyone complies with the requirements that we have, the possibility to be employed is the same for both genders. We have pilots, we have female specialists, we have female in special forces, we have female forces in navigation services, etc. So as regards the involvement of women in armed forces, we have them even at the planning level. It's mainly the issue of willingness of women to join the armed forces, and we also cannot ignore the fact, as Mr. Simonian has said, that perhaps we should be more proactive. So we should also launch pilot projects which will make the active service of women more attractive.
Thank you for that. Unless the organizers tell me otherwise, we have literally minutes left before the end of the panel, which is time for one last telegraphic, and I emphasize telegraphic, exchange of views. I will take 2 questions, no more, because I apologize to others. I don't have any more, and I saw actually 2 Slovak speakers, Jaronac and then Mario Nicolini. 30 seconds or less. Oh, 3. There's an exception for Count Schwarzenberg.
Thank you very much. Jasona from the Central European Policy Institute. Ministers, State Secretaries, thank you very much for your points. Just 2 short points, really. First, it's difficult to understand less defense spending. At least in Slovakia, when you see that with the last 5 or 6 years, we had 10% rise in GDP, and at the same time, 27% fall in defense spending. This is not about using better money or about crisis. This is about the lack of strategic thinking, in my opinion, and this applies to 3 probably out of 4 countries involved. Second question about the regional cooperation. Those of us who were following this issue for years, we know that there have been many political papers, documents, expert documents, meetings, but in reality, we have not reached more than one battle group to be not deployed in 2016. Right? In terms of education, we have fractured system of education in all 4 countries. In terms of defense planning, there was one exchange of defense planners for 2 weeks between Slovakia and Czech Republic. That's it. In terms of procurement, there was misused opportunity for several projects, and will be probably again. And in terms of joint deployment, there was nothing more than Slovak and Czech deployment in Afghanistan and in Kosovo. Could you please elaborate what concrete we plan in these areas for the next future? Thank you.
Wonderful. Mario Nicolini, can you follow Jarko's example and be equally succinct, possibly shorter?
Yeah, Mario Nicolini, good morning. 10 years with the Slovak MOD, now outside government. One of the co-authors of the recommendations of this group of people on more permanent cooperation based on the EU battle group. Ministers, thank you very much for encouraging words. The action plan is certainly welcome because it will allow better steering and a more results-oriented collaboration between the countries. So that's certainly to be welcomed. What do you make of, or what do you, are we looking into establishing a more robust institutional setup for V4 cooperation and defense below the defense ministers. That would certainly be a welcome development as well, in order to provide you better transparency and oversight and allow you to steer concrete projects forward, and then in turn inform the prime ministers and above for their guidance. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last word from the audience goes most fittingly to the most senior statesman among us, Count Schwarzenberg, former Czech foreign minister, right here in the front row.
Thank you so much. But maybe not only being the oldest president, but probably I am. Just, you see, if we're listening to the discussion, we should realize that the problem of the day is not how to spend less money, but how to spend more money. We have again floods, as you have read in the newspapers, in the northeast. Being several decades in politics, I always realized that measures against floods were always discussed after the flood, never before the flood. Now I see a big river, the water is already flooding around the country around it, and we are not ready to build any building measures today. We have to realize that maybe we can changing the use of money in our budgets, but we have to spend more. Our budget has to be changed in respect to immediate danger. If we miss it, we are not worthwhile to be members of NATO or any alliance, because we are not reliable.
Thank you for that. 3 excellent questions, if I may group them. Shouldn't defense be a far higher priority than it already is? What are we ready to actually buy, and do we need better institutions? Ministers, state secretaries in US politics, they say if you can't write your answer on the back of the matchbox, it's not worth answering. So can I ask you to give us the matchbox answers, 30 seconds, couple of minutes perhaps. Let me do that, if I may, in the reverse order in which we have spoken. Can I invite State Secretary Koterec perhaps to begin?
Možno by bolo zaujímavé, keby skôr odpovedali kolegovia, keďže tá otázka bola.
Perhaps it would be rather interesting if my colleagues would answer first, because the main question was from the Slovak side. At least 2 of those questions were given by Slovak journalists or Slovak colleagues, and 1 question was Czech. Now, allow me to touch upon the strategy. I think I've said quite clearly during my introductory remarks that it is mainly the strategy which is worrying us, which is the problem for all of us. And I think that this is mainly the area where we need to do a clear cross-cutting policy, cross-cutting in terms of the whole political spectrum, to approve principles which will enable strategic planning. Because in the area of defense, or at the lower levels, it is quite clear. On the other hand, it very much depends from those finances and from the envelopes of funds which are allocated at a political level. As regards specific steps that are to be taken, I wouldn't like to question what Mr. Nagy has said. As regards strategic planning, we have exchanged defense planners, all 4 of the countries, not just Slovak Republic and Czech Republic. This started with the exchange between Slovak Republic and Poland. This was the first exchange of defense planners. As regards palpable projects, one perhaps as an example for all, with the Czech Republic, as of the 1st of May, we have started the cross-border cooperation in terms of a protection of our airspace. So we have a crisis scenarios which mean that the defense of our airspace will be much more practical. We will be capable of defending our airspace jointly, and we can help one another, so we can cross each other's territories. We are very close to reach such an agreement with Poland. With Hungary, we have launched discussions, and the last couple of months, especially the ministerial meeting at the Visegrad level, this has been very helpful because it has increased the pace of the discussions, and I think we will be successful, and perhaps by the end of the year we will manage to conclude the discussions. So I can imagine that this year we will conclude the cross-border cooperation in airspace protection in the whole area of the Visegrad territory. So we will be in a territory in a situation, where we will be capable of helping one another, sharing our resources and helping to protect our mutual airspace without violating any international agreements or any international principles. There's a multitude of examples. I have perhaps exceeded an answer which would fit a matchbox. Nevertheless, let me give you one specific example. I think this was also a part of the question of Mr. Nicolini, that by the end of this year we will have a V4 team for the coordination of our activities, of our cooperation. This will be a permanent team where we will have permanent representatives of the Ministries of Defense. They will meet at this working level, and all of the action elements of our joint planning will be then directly transferred into the daily life of our armed forces. And perhaps let me stop here.
Fantastic. State Secretary Varga.
A stratégiai tervezést említette államtitkár úr valóban.
You talked about strategical planning. Yes, when we are preparing to do something and we plan some strategies, we do not plan. Of course, we cannot plan flood. We can count with it. There can be some force major happenings, activities happening, but I think that it has to be a part of preparing for unwanted activities that will happen, and the part of them has to be the strategy and the strategical planning. So part of this is our joint ideas and formulating our joint ideas and opinions, and the next step will be the action plan, which bears in its mind its topic, the main parts, the action. And of course, the defense budgeting, we were talking about this. Hungary made this decision. So in the forthcoming years, this budget we will have to increase. And we have already done the first steps on this way.
Wonderful. Minister Stropnický.
Děkuji. Odpověď na první otázku. Ano. V podstatě.
To the first question.
Na druhou otázku, málo regionální spolupráce, tak my jsme se včera dohodli.
As to the cooperation, yesterday we agreed with Tomáš that as Czech Republic we could be involved in an exercise of supersonic airplanes, aviation detachment, which Poland has twice a year with United States. We will see how fast we can implement this, but the reaction of Tomáš was very positive. This year we would like to organize important exercise, joint exercise with our Slovak colleagues with regard to acquisitions, mobile radars. We proceeded very far here with the negotiations with regard to trilateral cooperation, also in the issue of combat track vehicles. We would like to make a progress, and it's on a good way. It could be a common project on behalf of the Czech Republic. It would be track chassis, which is our specialization. Briefly, with regard to the presentation of the chairman Schwarzenberg, I have to agree with the statement that in the course of the last 5-6 years, the budget of our Ministry of Defense decreased by almost 22%. So we will not follow up on that. Now I forgot, Madam, about your very difficult question. I understood it that this rather concerns women as a potential first target, if I understood it correctly. Of course, this tends to be the case, and the best solution is to avoid any conflict at all. Of course, here I did not disclose anything of principle, but I want to stress the role of diplomacy. I want to stress the role of patient negotiations and common pressure, even if it does not bring always the optimum results. Nevertheless, I think that there are no many other options with regard to involvement of women in the security area in our country, it is rather extensive and it tends to grow. And it is the case also for my colleagues, because when we exit the planes, there are lines of soldiers and women soldiers, and there is always at least one woman present, which is a decoration for the unit itself. I think that Slovakia proceeded furthest in this way because one member of security, that was really a personal great deed from you.
And we save the best for last, Minister Siemoniak.
Tylko dlatego, że jestem tak okablowany, nie biłem braw panu ministrowi Schwarzenbergowi, bo bym zerwał tutaj instalację. Oczywiście Polska...
Poland is very much in favor of and supporting that in the remaining Visegrad countries the defense spending are back to the level which is in line of the needs. Let's recall that over the recent 5 years Poland increased the real level by 25%, and more than 20% of that is funneled to the modernization projects. It's not a coincidence that we see highlighted presence of the row of the Polish presidents of the Polish the defense industry. I think you want to act on me subliminally, because I see this row of president from the Polish companies. The colleagues talk about the specifics from our cooperation, and I can confirm that the new opening is a philosophy whereby we will no longer be only talking but start doing. To make sure that we have an exercise once per year, we'll be talking about joint radar projects, a uniform, universal platform, and we also agreed with the Czech minister the joint exercises. Let's look for such projects. We know why certain things were failing so far. So let's draw conclusions from that.
So the need of very strong involvement of the government. And yesterday you have some visits from prime ministers, and the prime ministers in their agenda deal with the defense, and this is very important for them. So I believe that if governments support this strongly, we will have some money. And this is what I want to say just to finish. And we are also joined by a strong belief that what is key for is the role of the United States, and we expect that the United States will give strong support to our regional cooperation open to other states. It is not the case that the Visegrad group is closed. We have a lot of experiences, recent experiences with France and Germany, or a quite exotic but attractive partner meeting here in Bratislava. I mean our Brazilian partners, and Visegrad is open. It is becoming more and more strong, and it's attractive for all parties around. So this is what I want to say to summarize.
The Visegrad Washington 5. I invite you to blame me for overrunning by about 10 minutes, but certainly it was time well spent. So thank the speakers, Minister Siemoniak, Minister Stropnicki, State Secretary Varga, State Secretary Koterec. Thank you.